Hey everyone, I'm Dean, and today we're going to talk about my live streaming experience on TikTok over the last year. I've been fortunate enough to manage to host a couple of top accounts on TikTok. So we're going to cover that today, talking about my history on TikTok and some of the great things I've done. Over the last year, I first started on TikTok hosting an account called InsGeek. It's a 3C account, sadly no longer with us on TikTok, which is a bit of a shame, but it was a great place to start. On there, I was selling electronic products, 3C stuff like, headphones, keyboards, mice, speakers. Also, I had the great time on TikTok of hosting some other shows as well and working with some great other hosts. I've worked on High Good. I've managed to host on there as well, the actual High Good official account. I've also been on FadFad, which is, back at the time when I did it was called FadFac. And we did a special Nintendo show supported by TikTok directly, where we were saying Nintendo gaming consoles, where I would then play a game live, which I must admit was probably the most challenging thing I've ever done on TikTok. Trying to play a game, interacting, and making sure you're not going to lose, especially when the viewers, 200 of them, can actually see you play. I've also managed to have some other great experiences as well. I've been invited to ByteDance head office a couple of times and seen some great stuff there and enjoyed their amazing tea bags. I've also been in sort of other great situations where I've been invited to take my TikTok certification by ByteDance directly, and I am a fully qualified top-level S-class host. I've also managed to work with some startups and new MCNs, so multi-channel networks, where they've been trying to build their new live rooms, and I've managed to work with Chinese students and also Chinese hosts that were looking to improve their English and their interactions on the UK market. So I've had some great experiences there. Outside of TikTok, I've done a few other great things too. I've done a couple of Amazon lives for fitness, and I was even in one little movie somewhere. Maybe you'll find it next year, who knows. So what we're going to cover in today's presentation is we're going to talk about how I went on the Hi Bobby account and grew that from a new account to an £11,000 GMV #1 account in just 2 months. We're also going to talk about some key points that make a live show interesting, the sort of things that keep your viewer engaged. As I've always said, TikTok is about entertainment. If someone's going to go shopping, they're on Amazon or eBay, Wish, Taobao, whatever platform it is, typing in what they want. On TikTok, the first hook is getting them entertained, because when they're swiping through, they want to know what's going on in that live room. So whether it's you've got a good user account or you're doing something fun and exciting, whether it's something silly with your hair or wearing a dress, you need to make sure you've got that engagement there. So we'll cover that as well. We're also going to talk about some things you should do during a live show and some certain things you should stay well from and never ever do in a live show as well. For our startup friends, we're also going to talk about how to employ hosts as well, and what sort of things you should be looking for. And even with things like operators, like I've always said, if you tell someone that it is the same as Douyin, then just stay well away from them, okay? Because it is not the same as Douyin. Have the same logo, the culture and the actual hosting of it and the environment and all sorts of things are very, very different. Also going to cover my opinions today on the various markets. Obviously, TikTok, when I first started, was new with the UK market there with the TikTok shop, and has now grown into a multi-market platform. It's still very new and still very much a not mature market, unlike Douyin. So we will go through my opinions on that as well. My first live show, proper live show, was on an account called InsGeek, which sadly is no more. It's been renamed, but it's where I started doing some 3Cs there. As you can probably see in the PowerPoint presentation there, I've got a bit of a look. That wasn't my first day, don't worry, but that was actually in a show where we did a mega countdown sale and it was extremely successful. We based it on something that is known in the UK, because again, the culture relativity to it was a Channel 4 show called Countdown. It has a very famous clock, that ticks. And once the countdown clock got to the point, we'd start the flash sale and then we'd run the countdown clock again. And there's lots of great things you can see that again go with user interactions. We dropped the price from $4.99 down to 99p and crazy stuff like that. It was great for user engagement and it was my best ever flash sale show. So after that, we did the InsGeek one for about a couple of months. Worked with a great guy called Chris, absolute legend to work with. And having that energy with him was the best way I started on TikTok. I got to learn a lot. He was very helpful, introduced a lot of items to me, and he was a pain, but made me into the host I am today, purely because I got very used to him handing me random products. Like I'd pick up this product and be like, oh, yeah, we're selling this today. And he'd do it to me in the middle of a show. So one thing I've got very used to is a lot of people normally talk about product preparation. I got used to having to deal with it in the middle of a live show. So I've got to be honest, I can now these days get a bit of a diva and I hate rehearsing because I got so used to in those 2 months working with Chris that in the middle of the show, he would just add something to the shopping basket. And next thing I know, it comes in red, comes in blue, it has, 128 gigabytes, has 256 gigabytes, and then that would move on to the next thing because that was the way we had to deal with it. So a good host will get used to working on the fly. Literally, boom, having to perform in the middle of the show and having to deal with what's thrown at them. I took the best opportunities to work with other people. Obviously, William from High Good, he's no longer there, but at the time, he was very good and on his top game. So when I had a few chances to work with him, I took it, just so I could learn how he worked. So, we did learn a bit from each other. I helped him with culture. He helped me with actually selling on TikTok because he had more experience in a bigger account. Okay, so yeah, I took some opportunities to work with him. I also worked with some other great people, like on FadFac, which is now known as FadFad. I got to work with Lynn, I got to work with Sky, and some other great Chinese hosts. It's not always about the foreigner. There are some very capable Chinese hosts that I got a chance to work with. I also got a chance to work with a lovely, lovely Molly from Ladyland as well when she was there. So she held the #1 spot for February in 2022 on TikTok. William, Molly, and Lynn and Sky, and you've got to remember, out of those 4 people I named, 3 of them are Chinese. So don't be disappointed in the local host. When I first did Hi Bobby, we first did a test show. It was about an hour long and we did £1,000, which again was pretty cool because compared to my life selling 3C items, it was an incredibly high amount of money for a short space of time. 3C always found was, normally 300-400 for a 5-hour live, occasionally get to 700, and the best day was around about 1,100. This one, boom, we were live for just over an hour and we did £1,000, which was kind of incredible. However, what I will say, like most first live shows, the first 5 minutes, either as the host or the host of a new show, is normally terrible. Because in those 5 minutes, no matter how much you practice or because sometimes we're all guilty of almost over practicing, that, it comes down to it like, oh, what's item number 10? And you're flicking through the phone and then you realize the picture isn't the same color as the dress that you want to find. And it gets a little bit difficult and you get a bit flustered with the rail. So what I will always say to anybody doing TikTok is, it's live, get over it, don't worry about it. Just try and have some fun with it. Don't freak out and just accept that probably the first 5 minutes are going to be terrible, okay? It's not probably what you want to hear, but it's just the reality of the situation. Because if we start setting that, bar so high that we're expecting ourselves to be amazing, it's going to go wrong. It's going to go more wrong than you realize, and you're going to get upset about it. Because with all the practicing in the world, knowing your product knowledge, you're either going to get to the point where you start tripping over your words, or you're going to start boring your viewer about the product because you're going to tell them too much information. For example, we have this product here. This is a comb, right? If you say it comes in blue, red, yellow, and it was made in a factory in Chongqing, I'm not sure if Chongqing's got any good factories, but anyway, and it comes in plastic, and it's environmentally friendly, and, it has 4 different sizes. The point is you're going to keep going on and realize if you've been talking about a comb for a minute because you've got all this product knowledge in your head, you're going to bore your viewer. Because realistically, most people just care about, is it going to work? Can I comb my hair with it? Is it going to make me look pretty? And what colors does it come in? And is there different sizes available? So, like I always say, get through the options, get through the facts, and have some fun with it, okay? Like you saw then, I was like, oh yeah, see? There we go. Just have some fun with it. Don't over practice because it can get a bit dangerous. Again, also when it comes to finding products, make sure you have a good support team with you because as much checking through the shopping basket, you can always have a few slip-ups. Because if you're working with, let's say, 99 items, the maximum shopping basket, some items can be changed around whilst you're live, or there's going to be some last-minute changes. And sometimes, the red picture actually may look really cool, but you may only have the blue sample. So it's one of those moments where you just have to accept that some things are not going to go perfect and just have as much fun with it as you can. Okay, so back to the Hi Bobby live. So on that particular one, we did this first, £1,000 live. And I'm not going to lie, the first 5 minutes were terrible. You know, I was looking through the rail trying to find dresses and like, oh my gosh, you know, even though they tried all these techniques to try and help us out, like putting items 1 to 50 on one rail and items 50 to 99 on the other rail, okay? So even though they were nicely laid out and all sorts of things like that, we're still like thinking through like this, okay? But the art is just to keep talking. You know, if it's just talking about, you know, hey guys, how you doing? You doing all right today? What have you had for lunch? And all that kind of great engagement stuff, you know? Because if you've got like a load of viewers, and this one did do quite well for a first show, because back then the market wasn't so saturated and the TikTok policy was amazingly great for the UK viewer. It's not every live show can be the same, because there's been situations where I've had like, you know, 70 people watching and no one's commenting. It feels like you're in a room of ghosts. But generally as a rule, if you're between 1 and 10 viewers, your key aim is to be entertaining. You need to get the hook in and get them to stay in your live room and interact with you, okay? Selling the product needs to become second at this point. Sorry, bosses, Lao bands, it's a fact, okay? If you can't get people to watch you, then you've got no hope. So if you're in between 1 and 10 viewers, my best attitude that I always suggest to everybody is be interesting, be fun, be engaging, okay? Whether that's through games or what we used to do on Hi Bobby was sometimes we just spoke about our daily life a little bit. We speak about our daily life and then, you know, drop in a few things about items. Like, you know, today, this is £2.99 here. Like, wow, this is amazing. It's lovely and soft. And in our basket, it says 99 pence. And then he'd be like, so Sam, how are you today? You doing all right? What did you have for dinner? And he'd be like, noodles. I'm like, Sam, noodles again. And then you'd get some engagement from your viewer. This is why working with a very good assistant operator, whatever you want to call them, some people call them OPs, needs to be good, okay? Even if they're not great at computers, as long as they can help you out find items and they've got a bit of personality, allowing the host to bounce a little bit. Because if that live room's empty, if you're talking to yourself, you're gonna sound a bit crazy and it's not gonna have the same energy. So if you're like, hey, so how are you today, mate? And then, you know, a little voice behind the camera goes, I'm doing all right. Bit hungry, bit tired. And then, you know, you can get a bit of conversation on and then you rope the viewers into your conversation. So as you rope the viewer in, boom, you've got someone there. It may take a while and it may take a few live shows because you need that 1 or 2 viewers that become your followers. So make sure to tell them to follow you. You know, CTA as I call it, call to action, follow, tap the screen, check the shopping basket, okay? So make sure you tell them to follow you because they come back, even if they're just to chat to you, they are useful. And they don't buy anything. We always had one viewer in Hi Bobby and she was known for never buying anything because we always check the data. She'd ask for lots of item numbers and she'd be engaging, okay? Which, you know, may sound annoying, but if you've only got 10 viewers, it makes your show interesting, which is kind of cool. Right, what I would then say is your next stage is when you get somewhere between 10 and 30, you'll get quite a general, quite nice item pace. And as you get a nice item pace, you also get some data. And if you've got a good assistant and someone with a bit of mind of data, what they then should start to do is give you a top items list. So based on the CTR rate, the click-through rate, which will show which items are showing interesting to the viewers. So then through either a pop-up on your little screen there, you know, maybe using something like Faceshoe or whatever you want to use, or even WeChat, you can have an item list that is useful to you, the host. And then you can flick through and pull up these items time and time again to introduce to the viewers because you know there's data to show they're interesting. In between a general flow of item numbers that are coming quite naturally. Then as you'll find, as you get between like 50 to 100, you'll be generally quite fast paced. So at fast pace, you don't need to be as engaging, but I would not say don't be. So make sure you're still saying hi to a few people, but you don't need to be like greeting people, you know, because sometimes when people get into low live streams, they're like, hello, user 91, hello, Jeff, hello, Bob, hello, Mr. Jung. You get the idea, okay? And but when you get up to a higher level, all you pretty much want to maybe do is maybe saying, hey, Dave, thank you for the follow. You're a legend and stuff like that. Okay. Just acknowledge your viewers a few bits and maybe drop in there between items, like just random stuff you're thinking like, so, you know, you watched anything good on telly lately or, you know, what's for dinner again? Food is a very good topic. Know your market. Like for the UK, there are certain things like Tuesday, buy one, get one free on Domino's Pizza. Start with Domino's Pizza, and then even like your local Chinese restaurant in the UK sometimes does a buy one, get one free on a Tuesday. Sunday, famous Sunday roast. It's a traditional food. Ask what meat, whether it's got chicken, turkey, beef, gammon. You get the idea. There are a few things you can do that you can get engaging conversations. And like I've always said, if you're doing things like children's clothes, you can have to talk about Peppa Pig and SpongeBob. Which one do you prefer? And things like that. There's ways to spark that engagement. Just as little drop-ins in between items. It doesn't take long. What I'll also then say is you build up again. You'll get to what I call another level. When you start getting past 150, you'll start to find those items are coming in very fast. So at that point, you need a good assistant. Because if you want to be able to serve those people quickly, because again, remember with the data that the engagement time on TikTok is around about 30 seconds. So you don't want to keep people waiting too long. That's why when I go back to about learning about your product, you don't want to be filling your head with too much knowledge so you risk boring your viewer. Because if you're boring your viewer, going back to your comb again, saying this comes in, plastic and it's a nice and bendy material and it's absolutely awesome for your hair. And if you're, a restaurant owner that wants to look fashionable today as you're serving your great, I don't know, Big Mac, yeah? You're going to bore some people, okay? You might be funny with it once or twice, but it gets a bit too much. You need to get through it quickly. And if you've got a good assistant, they already know what the next item is on the screen. So as you finish with this item, you're passing this on the way, and then in comes the next item without you having to get to it. So boom, you're straight on the next item for that viewer. And that's how it works. You'll also get to a point then where you get past that stage. If you get to like 500 viewers, then you're back on data, because there's no way you can keep up with those comments, because the comments are coming in so fast that you're going to struggle to engage with people, and you need to calm down, because there's nothing you can do about it if that row is going so fast that you can barely keep up. So again, you're back to your assistant to then give you key data on the popular items. And then you're also with your own ability of noticing maybe that person there's chucked that item number out a few times. Let's try and get it out of them there. Because again, people do want the love from you as well, okay? So it's about getting the right balance. And so, hey guys, just keep chucking that item number up. I'm not ignoring you. I will get to you. I do love you. I do terrible love hearts, but you get the idea. And then you can just give that little bit of engagement to show, guys, we love you. I'm only human. I can't go and stuff like that. You got to keep that viewer there and keep them loving you. That is the most important part. Engagement is key. Remember, as I always say, when people come to TikTok, they're coming there because they're bored. If they were on Amazon or eBay, they'd be typing in a search bar. They're in your live stream because they've scrolled past and you've done something interesting. Whether it be the background behind you, because that is very important, or you yourself. I say you always want to be above 30 seconds to show you are being interesting. Okay? And if you go too much above 2 minutes, then it's getting to that point where it's getting a bit weird. But we had a massive PCU, so top viewer count. That means at one particular time, the people watching me on TikTok was 354. So like I said before, those item numbers are going to fly up that screen and you're going to be busy. So that's when the team needs to be amazing. Because if the team breaks down, you can't do it. Okay? So you as a host can't do it. And if you've got two hosts, it still won't work either. Because you need someone there to be grabbing those items and pinning those products, whether it be one assistant or two assistants. Also, what was really important about that particular day, there was a massive view count of just under 37,000 people. Most of that, again, was in the prime 10 hours I did. So again, keeping that energy up was key. We did some great strategies. Every 30 minutes, we did a screenshot game. Screenshot games are great if you've got a lot of viewers. Like I said, the PCU was 354. So typically, when we're doing some of these giveaways, that's when the traffic would come because there'd be a lot of data. People would be typing in the comments like, love hi Bobby, because that's what we did. You would type love hi Bobby and put some emojis. As long as you were following us and you made a purchase, you were eligible to win. So we'd have a nice little countdown from like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, screenshot. And then we'd take a screenshot on the iPhone. And then I'd built the suspense because, for me, I had been live for many hours at this point, so I wanted a drink of water. So the viewers all wanted to know who won. I'd grab a cup of, and start drinking. Some people may think it's unprofessional, but the key fact is it was great for engagement time because we could make that giveaway go for about 3 or 4 minutes. So you've got the viewers in there because they want to know if they've won. And, I'm taking a sip of water and they're like, come on, Dean, who's won? And I'm then going one of our regulars. I know you've purchased. And you can do stuff like that. That's great engagement. And then all of a sudden you like shout the name out and you start clapping like, way, Erica Robinson, you won, and stuff like that. And it absolutely brings great energy. Also, what was great on there as well, we're using an OBS Live, which means you can put the stickers on the screen and it's highlighting the promotion. So we were giving stuff away. If you like made £15 worth of purchase, you could maybe get, a free pair of socks. If you made £20 worth of purchase, you get maybe like a baby shark, and you spent £30 of purchase, you get like a kiddie camera or something. So again, loads of great hooks to keep people in the show. Again, what also made the show very successful, because it was a high ranking account, TikTok themselves were happy to support it. And they gave $3,000 worth of support to the account in traffic, which made a massive difference in what the show was able to do. Low priced items were also great because we had stuff starting at £1.99, because the average sale price on that show was only just £2.67. So you've got to think about this, £11,781 worth was sold with an average price of £2.67. So you can say that was a lot of items. Okay, so what was also great was the policy at the time was great for the viewer. They got lots of free shipping as well, and there was lots of coupons around, making it absolutely a fantastic show to host. So the policy was great at the time. Shipping time was 10 to 14 days, but don't be put off by this. I know we're in China and we're doing cross-border, but if your product is good and it looks like a good quality and the pricing is right and people can justify the wait, meaning it's not something that they could maybe go to a local clothes shop and buy for the same price and have it tomorrow, or buy it on Amazon with Prime delivery, then they're going to wait for you. And if your hosts are good and your team is good, they'll build a relationship with them and they'll just be happy to purchase from you, because TikTok is all about buying from people. It's a bit like the retail situation. When you go into a store, you sometimes build a relationship with the actual sales assistant in the store, because they're talking to you in a way you like. And it doesn't matter that it's a little bit more expensive, but because they've got that relationship with you, they trust you. And that is also very important on TikTok as a host. So if you are hosting on TikTok, you need to make sure that if you're in it for the long game, that you're going to be giving a reliable service, you're going to represent a great brand, and when things go wrong, even though you are not the boss, you're not the customer service, that those viewers know that if they drop you a message in that live stream, that you're going to be there to look after them. Next up, we're going to talk about things you should do on TikTok and things you should never do on TikTok. Right, we've got a long list of words that you probably should never mention. Some of those are quite obvious, because they're quite offensive, or they're just words that can get you into trouble. So, the key things to stay away from are things that obviously are going to upset the AI and going to get you either banned or, in trouble for a little bit with a violation. And we don't want that. So stay away from things like, talk about getting people onto other platforms. So if you're trying to direct people to your Shopify account or a website, be very careful. Suggest people that check out your videos or, follow you or check your profile. Okay? Don't say follow that link, because you're going to get into trouble. Or if you're going to send them onto Amazon or stuff like that, you will get a violation, because I've done this by accident on Hi Bobby when talking about the app, because they have their own app. And I got a violation for directing traffic to another platform. So that is one thing to remember. Another thing you should always remember is don't invite your viewers to follow you on WhatsApp or something like that. I had one guy I worked with on an account, and he was trying to get one of the viewers, he was a guy, and I think he thought she was a pretty girl, and he wanted her to add him on WhatsApp. Boom, 3-day ban, okay? So again, be careful with this sort of thing as well. I also saw a good friend of mine, she was setting up her OBS live, so they're trying to sort the camera out, and they did a test live. And during the test live, their 4-year-old niece came onto the camera and the AI picked up on it. Boom, 7-day ban because they had a minor on the camera. So keep your kids, if you've got kids, if you're doing this a family thing or a family business, keep your kids off the camera, okay? I know you may love them, but just keep that camera away from them. Also, from my own experience, when I did the technology show, right, I told a story once about how this phone was so great that, if you leave it on the counter, your friends may steal it to open up your camera and take a selfie, okay? I then got banned for 1 day for inciting illegal activities, basically encouraging people to steal stuff. So be very careful about what you say on TikTok sometimes. What could sound like a funny joke, you may pay for with a few-day ban. I've also been told you need to make sure you go careful with showing things that project smoke, like humidifiers and air purifiers and stuff like that. So go careful with the smoke on those, because it can look like a smoking product. And smoking items are banned on TikTok. Also, if you're showing something with a knife on it, again, it can look like a dangerous weapon. So make sure when you're holding it, even if it's a toy one, because we had a toy kitchen set once, and every time we showed the blade, hand over the blade so you can't see the blade, okay? So things like that can make a massive difference when you're on TikTok. Make sure you are always careful with what you do. Don't incite political debates. That's kind of quite obvious. Don't say anything that could be offensive. Remember, it is 2022, and in Western countries, assuming if people are men or women can sometimes upset them. Some people do get a bit worried about where you're talking about where they're from, because I've seen this in a few live shows where, for example, I did one very recently, and the assistant drove me crazy. And every time a viewer joined the live, it was like, "Hi, Stuart! Are you a boy or a girl? Where are you from?" And it was just like, we're just going to run into trouble. And then you get that comment coming out about, "Why do you assume I'm a boy?" Stuff like that. So, like I always say, that stay away from that thing. Food is generally a very safe topic. I've mentioned this before, and I'll tell you again and again. If you're in doubt about anything to talk about, go for food. So, how to employ a host for the brand, or as an MCN, so a multi-channel network provider, or as a TSP, a TikTok selling partner, or you may be just looking to make a creator account, a Darren, and do that kind of thing. All of this is a very important process. Some data suggests that us foreign hosts do get a better return, but we are quite expensive. I know I am. So costings of a foreign host will generally cost you about 3 to 4 times the amount of a Chinese host. So why go foreign? Well, there's some advantages for foreigners. Like I said, we do get a better return. So if you've got a good price product with a great profit margin, then fine. And you are targeting markets like the UK and US because we understand the culture better, and English is our first native language, making it really easy for us to interact and throw in like slang words, that aren't maybe commonly taught here in China. If you're going for Southeast Asia, then maybe a Chinese host actually could be better, because as English is not their first language, they will speak English at a slower speed. Whereas I'm quite guilty of this. If I'm in a UK live stream or a US live stream, I will naturally speak faster the faster the live stream is going. Whereas in a Southeast Asia live stream, I have to remember to slow down because the viewers' English is not the first language. So we've also got to remember though, foreign host is not always the best option even for UK and USA. There are good examples, like some of the hosts that I've worked with, such as Lynn and Sky on FadFad, where they're both Chinese hosts. Lynn's a nice tall pretty girl and Sky is a nice pretty boy. But the point is that, the English level is not necessarily that high either. I believe, they could possibly just be CET4 at the original, certification stage. But what works for them is they can read comments and interact with the viewer well. And that's why they get such a great following. And what you need to remember about this account of FadFad is it has ranked #1 totally across the GMV for the whole month, for quite a few months. And then if it doesn't rank #1, it definitely is usually in the top 5. So for a Chinese hosted account, it does show that Chinese hosts do play a massive role in TikTok and can also get a great return. I've also worked with some other great Chinese hosts, such as Molly on Ladyland. She was #1 for February and also #2 in January. So again, that shows there is a good place for a Chinese host as well. So as much as I'm a great foreign host, there are some fantastic Chinese ones as well that should always be considered. As I said before, don't always just look at the CET4 certificate because, I know that's a lower grade, but you need someone who can not just repeat vocabulary. Because if someone's got a great vocabulary range, yes, they can talk about a product, but they do run the risk of boring the viewer if that's all they can talk about. If they can tell you it comes in red, green, blue, yellow, and it was made in a nice factory in Xi'an, okay? And all that kind of stuff. But if they can't talk to the viewer, you are not going to gain followers, gain trust, and gain fantastic interactions with your viewer. And that is what you are looking for overall. Now, another really important question. How much to pay a TikTok host? This is kind of quite key and quite important because there are different levels to TikTok hosts. Obviously, people that have had experience hosting on TikTok. Some Chinese hosts may have been on, other great apps such as Douyin, Little Red Book and Kaishu, I believe it's called. So there are other places to stream, and as foreigners, we may have done Instagram Live, we may have done Facebook Live, or even YouTube Live. So these are different factors. Like I say to everybody, TikTok is a different animal. So if they've been on Douyin, or the assistant's been on Douyin, go careful, because the culture is different. It may look like the same app, it may be produced by the same company, but there is definitely fundamental differences in the presentation. So they obviously will be used to speaking to a camera and running a live show, which is kind of quite important. What I have tend to notice, the general market prices in the major cities for a host, if it's a part-time one, they're Chinese, would generally be between 1 to 200 RMB an hour. And if they're a foreigner, it generally ranges between 300 to around about 700 an hour, depending on, if they're a native speaker and their relevant experience. As you can probably guess, I'm probably more up the other end of the scale. When it comes to, monthly salaries as well, Chinese hosts generally seem to sit around about the 8K to about 1.2 W. So that's the general feeling you'd get for those. And for foreigner hosts, depending again if they're native or not, between 1.2 all the way up to 3 W, because of, depending on their native and if they're experienced. If they're not native, they are down more towards the 1.2 W, especially if they're not British or American or for the target market. That is obviously a very key factor when it comes to a foreign host's pay. Because if they speak English natively and if they are aware of the culture of the actual target market, it can make a huge difference. Like I can use plenty of rhyming slang, in the UK, whether, we want to talk about bottles of water, because obviously that's quite fashionable, or whether we're going to talk about, going to Primark and getting your next best t-shirt. Certain things that you may have gone, what? But the local people will understand. And that makes a massive difference, again, with interactions and why certain foreign hosts need to be paid more. How to train a host to host a live stream? Well, there's a few techniques, okay? Some work really well, some don't. And it depends on the person that you're working with and how scared they are. Because like I said before, that first live show, the first 5 minutes, let's just accept it, will probably be a complete mess. No matter how much you practice, or anything like that. If you've never been on a live stream before, it's scary. You need to work out where the products are, the buttons on the shopping basket are, and all that kind of stuff. So whether you're doing it on an actual live account, or if your company is clever enough, I would recommend this. Test accounts are great things, especially for new hosts. But obviously with test accounts, the traffic can be quite bad. So it doesn't make it necessarily as realistic unless you've got, a few fake fan phones. But training can be quite a key thing. Sometimes, TikTok, ByteDance actually do run their own training courses, but they are not very often, and getting on them can be quite tricky. Hence, I had to work quite hard, I know even I did, to be able to get on a course to take my certification to become an S-class host. In the TikTok certifications, S is the highest, then you get an A, and then you get a B. So that's how it works. But getting onto those courses to get those qualifications can actually be very tricky. And you need to be able to get the official to tell you when it is and all that kind of stuff. In the end, I actually had to fly to Hangzhou from Shenzhen to be able to take the course to get the certificate. There are also lots of great online resources here. Making Friends is a very well-known brand. Absolute fantastic experts in areas such as Douyin and stuff like that. Now here on TikTok, there's loads of great resources you can check with. But what I will say is, stay away from anybody who tells you exactly the same as Douyin. Yes, I may not speak Chinese fluently, but there are some very fundamental cultural differences. Shouting and all that kind of stuff in that kind of thing is not a popular thing on TikTok and generally annoys the viewer. So one of those things to remember as well. Going massive with scripted words also isn't a thing. So generally stay away from that too. I know for Chinese hosts, it can be a thing to help them get through it, but sticking to the script is going to equal failure. So make sure you look at these different strategies as well. Practice hosting. Get a foreign host for maybe for a short time if you want to learn things about culture, interactions, and how to entice the audience to interact with you. Pre-trained hosts, there's lots of them about now because the market is starting to get a bit mature. Yes, foreigners are expensive, like I said. Maybe get a foreigner host for part-time. I've done a few jobs like that where I've worked part-time with a few companies, literally to host for a short time and, you know, talk about different parts of how to increase the interactions. I've sat with many new Chinese hosts. I've worked with plenty of students as well. You know, students can be a great resource because, you know, they want to improve their English because, you know, they're taking a qualification. Yes, they're part-time as well, which for you can also be a great resource to actually start your TikTok account without paying lots of money. It gives you that chance to like iron out those little, you know, things you want to get right, like your product and stuff like that, and not have to pay a massive salary. Something all to be thought about. But yes, make sure the training is there, check your resources, get someone who's had some experience, and also get an operator that's worked on TikTok as well. You know, like I've said again, and I'll stress it, Douyin and TikTok are two totally different animals when it comes to how the traffic works, the data available, and the actual culture of doing it. They are very different in their actual, you know, runnings of the show and how the interactions will go with the viewer. Culture of Chinese is very different to the culture in the UK, US, and even in Southeast Asia. And that needs to be fundamentally remembered when doing any TikTok show. So looking at the TikTok markets, obviously TikTok is now in 7 countries at the moment. Started off in the UK, and also we've got Indonesia. But Indonesia is a closed market, so you need a local business there in order to run. Random fact, top selling item there is noodles. A bit random. But anyway, moving on, let's talk about the other countries that you can actually sell to as a cross-border seller without a local account. So we've got the UK. The UK has 70 million people living there. It is quite a market. It is still recovering from policy changes. So sales are not what they used to be, but it is getting better. We've also got places like Thailand. Thailand, similar sort of population grab as the UK, 70 million users, but also not as many English speakers. We've then got other countries such as Vietnam with 100 million users, and we've also got, you know, the Philippines with 111 million people living there as well. Philippines, great market, lots of English speakers, very happy to, you know, buy the product quite happily. We've also got some other countries that are quite small. Some people have said they've had some success with Malaysia, but like I said earlier, Malaysia is quite a small country with only 30 million people. It is half the size of the UK. And again, English is not the first language, making it quite a difficult setup there to get, you know, the viewers because of the language barriers and stuff like that, because there's many multiple languages. We've also got Singapore. That one's got a really small population of 5.5 million people. What I'm trying to get to here is these markets are quite small in certain areas, and what you might want to be aware of, sometimes TikTok will ask for a deposit depending on which zone you're selling in. So if you're going to part with a massive deposit to sell in Singapore to only 5.5 million people, your product needs to be niche enough to be targeting those kind of viewers. We've also then got the US market today. That's coming in now, you know, with Shopify and stuff like that, with a bit of shopping basket too. That one's got 0.3 billion people there. So it's a bigger market, which is quite cool compared to the, you know, the rest of the world combined that the TikTok's already focusing on. It makes up for just under 50%, giving around about a rough total of 0.7 billion, you know, population that TikTok can reach. What you also need to remember, that against China is only half. You know, China records a population of 1.4 billion on Douyin, right? Douyin is a far more mature market. So China is double the size and far more mature. So what you need to remember when dealing with all these markets, that TikTok is still maturing. It's very young. UK is only just over 1 year old now. Southeast Asia has been around for around about 9 months, okay? And the US, the shopping basket there is still very, very, very new and very limited to who can use it. So these are important factors you need to remember when setting up these new markets accounts, especially on TikTok. If you've done a lot of Douyin, boom, brilliant. You're going to probably expect some great results. Sorry to tell you, it's going to take a little time. Most accounts I've worked with, and after being on some TikTok direct training, most accounts will take around about 2 months to actually get a proper bit of traction. This means so the AI can learn, one, you're not a fraudulent account. Two, what your account's about, so they can label the account properly. And three, that you are a reliable and trustable seller for them to give you good traffic that can be converted into sales that are reliable to be sent to those customers and that they're, most importantly, going to be happy with. So if you're going to embark on a TikTok journey, don't expect it to be a 1 week amazing fix. You're going to have many live shows where you're going to do zero. Let's face facts. If you're new to the platform and you're not paying advertising costs and you've not got a massive budget, it's going to take some time. And you have to sit through some of those bad live streams with low amounts of viewers and low GMV. But one thing I have noticed is, from my own experience on some of the brand accounts that we've set up, that after 2 months, you can start to see some results. And after taking some recent TikTok USA training, where they said it takes about 2 months for the system to trust your account and label your account properly, it will make sense. Thanks for taking the lesson, guys. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you found some useful tips to get yourself started and progress yourself in your TikTok journey. It's still a new and emerging market, so there are still things we're all going to be learning. I hope you've enjoyed it to the point that you're going to come and join us and we can meet in person and maybe take a selfie. Why not, right? Who knows? We might even get a chance to do a TikTok show together. Come join us. Thumbs up. Much love, guys, and hope to see you later on this month. If not, hope to see you again soon, somewhere on another course through Making Friends. Bye, guys. Have fun.